Hey, we're here with the Couplepreneurs. It's Kyle and Ariel Tresch from kyleandariel.com. They are a husband and wife digital marketing pair of consultants. They've built a thriving relationship and many thriving businesses over the past 11 years, but they found themselves in a dark place a few years ago. We're going to find out about that, how the everyday stresses of business began to take a toll on their relationship, but they fought for their marriage. They pioneered a brand new approach to doing life and business in a way that has allowed their relationship to flourish and their businesses to skyrocket. Their mentorship company is called Couplepreneurs. They equip other entrepreneurial couples with the proven strategies they need to grow businesses to 7 figures or more without growing apart in the process. Exciting stuff. Kyle and Ariel, glad to be speaking with you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. And we're looking forward to having a conversation about maybe a topic that a lot of people haven't heard before. Yeah. But I could tell you from our experience being an entrepreneur couple over the last decade, we've learned a lot of hard lessons, and we're happy to help others kind of mitigate those mistakes in the process.
Yeah, you found yourselves a unique niche, but it's not so off the beaten path that people don't want to know about it, and maybe they're even afraid to ask about it. Like the other day, I did a podcast interview, and usually it's one-on-one, right? But then sometimes it's like you, where there's 2 people, and then it wasn't until the recording was over that they mentioned that they live apart from each other. And I'm like, oh, I thought they were married, but they happen to be like man and woman business partners. And maybe we assume that, right? When there's opposite sex, their partner, we assume that they're married. And but and so it's not always the case, but in this case, it's true. And we want to avoid the strain happening from like your marriage messes up the business messes up the marriage. And so with all that stuffed in, crammed in, what are you guys all about? In your own words, what has you passionate, fired up, excited?
Yeah, so I can start, and then if there's anything you want to add. So what gets us excited about what it is that we do is just, I think growing up, we all see a lot of examples of relationships that aren't always the most ideal relationships that we envision ourselves being in. Most of the people that we see aren't very happy, and we tend to be inundated with a lot of different messages around how with marriage and with business, you have to sacrifice in one way, shape, or form, right? And so what we're very passionate about is showing that, you can have both a thriving business and a thriving relationship at the same time. You don't have to choose.
Yeah, and we learned this the hard way because you know how earlier on in a marriage, people call the stage the honeymoon stage or the honeymoon phase? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately for us, we had what we called the anti-honeymoon stage, where as soon as we got married, being 2 driven entrepreneurs, we got back into our house and both of us started working on separate sides of the house, almost like we were working in silos. And instead of enjoying the honeymoon phase of life, we just dove back into our business. And it was the first time that we actually experienced tension in our relationship. And we started dealing with things that we didn't know it at the time, but thousands of other entrepreneur couples deal with as well.
Yeah, we started experiencing like, how do you actually run a business together? How do you stop thinking about work or talking about work when you want to actually be present as a couple with each other? How do you guys align on what the vision looks like and the approach to getting there when sometimes you have different approaches? How do you give feedback to each other in a business context without anybody feeling criticized? And just in general, how do you grow a business in a way that doesn't feel like your health, your relationship, and other aspects of your life have to come at the expense of that business growth? So for us personally, when we were going through all of this, as our busyness went up, our intimacy actually went down and our income flatlined at that point. And it was the first time we'd really experienced something like this.
Yeah. And there weren't any other people out there, any experts, gurus, relationship, speakers that were talking about how to navigate being 2 entrepreneurs in one relationship. So we had to create our own path forward. It took a lot of hard lessons, but over time, because we were so committed to each other in marriage and because we both wanted to honor our calling in business, we created brand new strategies, brand new systems, and brand new structures to just help us figure out this whole thing called couplepreneurship. Before we did that, our income was completely flatlined. After we figured that out, not only did we enjoy more intimacy together, enjoy more connection and romance together, but our businesses took off as well. We went from being completely capped in our revenue to all of a sudden my business 3x. I had a digital marketing consulting business and that just went through the roof. And then Ariel, who had a organic marketing coaching business, her business skyrocketed as well. And all of a sudden we're looking at each other going, wait a second. What if we didn't have business problems? What if we had relationship problems that were showing up in the business? And if we could solve what we call the couplepreneur dynamic, that could be the actual ticket to growing businesses. since then, we've started teaching and training other entrepreneur couples on how to do this. And now we're at a place today where, by the grace of God, we have more couples in our community who are enjoying record revenue month after record revenue month, while actually going on more date nights with their spouse, while enjoying more intimacy with their spouse, and actually having more fun in the process. So all of that is why we do what we do. It's because we had to basically take the stairs so that way we can offer other people that elevator.
Man, I mean, so many good insights packed into that. And there was something in there you said, Kyle, it was like 3 S's, right? There was like systems, strategies, and like something else. What was the other one?
Structures. I tend to speak in alliterations, and I don't know if that's because of my marketing background. But yeah, with system, strategies, and structures, because essentially we didn't have any frameworks. We didn't have any go-to tools or processes to navigate those complex dynamics. So we had to create them ourselves and install those systems into our day-to-day lives. So that way we can actually have more free time as a couple, that we can actually prioritize the fact that we're a married couple, not just 2 business partners that happen to live in the same house. We also had to figure out, like, how do we communicate and make decisions about business without offending each other or stepping on each other's toes, and all these different things. There were no structures around. So thankfully, we were just able to create frameworks and structures that have now become systems that we share with other people.
Well, very cool. Well, you figured a lot out, and you brought a lot of this to light, in that maybe a lot of like the success people have up to a point is accidental and it's just happened. But then when your luck runs out, it goes the other way. And that maybe some of us have grown up, maybe you guys too, like, because you brought it up, that you see these relationships, maybe it's parents, maybe it's friends' parents, whatever, maybe it's just friends, but like they don't really get along very well. Or you when you become an adult, you're like, why did that couple get married? Why are they even together? And maybe they just like fell into it because of momentum. But then when there's this added stress, when the going gets tough, whether it's having a baby, getting married, financial difficulties, whatever, then you're like, hey, luck got us here, but now we need to have some of these extra rules in place. And they're not just there just because of like for fun or control. It's to kind of keep things on the right track and to have the proper configuration. That way one doesn't eat the other, right? That way the business doesn't destroy the marriage. That way the business helps the marriage. And so, I mean, what have you learned? Like when you help people, right? You help these couples, like why are they sometimes together, or why do they get in the business together? Where are they messing up? What have you observed?
When you want to start with that?
So there's a lot to unpack there, and I love the question. Essentially, there's, as far as why somebody gets in business with their spouse, I think that there's an expediency factor. It's just, you have more efficiency, you have more productivity of 2 people working together than not. And what better teammate to have than a person who understands you and can complement you like your spouse? I think that that's a big reason why a lot of married couples are getting into business together. And as far as like, some of the things that we see, as wonderful as it is to do business with your spouse, which it is great, there's actually studies that show that couples who grow businesses together actually tend to see more growth in the business, and they have more staying power. They usually last longer than other businesses. And there are some theories as well around how couples in business make more money together. But there's also the shadow side of that, which are some of the issues that show up. And there are really 3 core issues that we see when it comes to couplepreneurs, as we call it, working together. Number 1 is that they're not usually aligned in where they want to go. And what I mean by this is, when Ariel and I were in our anti-honeymoon phase, both of us had 2 visions of what we wanted our ideal life to look like. And what we found out at the time is that when you have 2 visions in one household, it creates division. Di is usually the prefix too. So division creates division in the household. So one of the biggest shifts that changes everything for the entrepreneur couples that we have the opportunity to coach is to have them come together and create a unified vision, where they come together and they ask each other, what are our shared values? What is the shared lifestyle that we both want to co-create together? And how much money is it going to take for our businesses to create that ideal lifestyle for us? That's usually the first ticket, is just coming together and aligning on the vision. The second thing that we see is that a lot of times couples don't trust each other to the degree that is necessary in order to scale a business together. So we have this term that we call couple confidence, that we actually turn into a game for a lot of the coaching clients that we have the opportunity to work with, where essentially there are some proven strategies you could put in place to develop confidence in one another. And if you look at the word confidence, the root word is to confide in. So to trust in. So if you have self-confidence, you're trusting yourself. But if you can trust your partner to do what they're going to do, and they can trust you to do what you say you're going to do, it creates not just self-confidence, but couple confidence. And that's what creates that magnetism that draws other people to you when you walk into a room with your significant other, because you have so much unshakable confidence. And then the third thing that we see, quite honestly, is that, especially because we work with very successful business owners, typically everybody is short on time.
Yeah.
The business demands creep up, so that way the time for each other and their family and their personal life just kind of goes in the back burner. So what we teach the couplepreneurs in our community is how to take back command of your time and tell your schedule what to do, not let the schedule tell you what to do. When you combine these three factors, that's what makes for a harmonious working relationship with your spouse. But without those three things in place, I can tell you, because we live through it, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to get on the same page, have the plan with our spouse, that way our goals are aligned, and we need to trust each other, and trust works both ways, right?
Yep.
That you need to give up some control freakiness and let the other person do their thing, but you also have to kind of get it back in return, and then we need to free up our time and figure out how to be more of an owner and less of an operator. So that way, I like your phrase there, that you tell your schedule what to do and not the other way around.
Yep.
And so, I mean, you have this cool community, help these cool couple entrepreneurs. Tell me some stories. Does anyone come to mind as far as some couple that really needed help and they came to you, worked your program, and came out looking shiny and spiffy?
You know what? I want to turn this over to Ariel, but specifically, I think what we should talk about is the interplay between relationships and how that shows up in the business. Because most people don't expect how strongly the relationship dynamic impacts your business.
Yeah. So what we've seen with a lot of couples is, when we think of what we do, it's combining how do you grow a successful business while like keeping that thriving romantic relationship. And what we actually see is a lot of times when people are experiencing revenue issues, there's usually something that has to be dialed in within the relationship that is causing that that plateau, so to speak, in their revenue. We experienced it ourselves, but I can think of a couple clients actually that come to mind. One in particular, when they started working with us, they came in and they were like, hey, we have absolutely no time for our relationship. We're at each other's throats. We don't have time together. We feel more divided than ever before. And at the same time, their revenue was just at a complete plateau. They weren't growing the way that they wanted to. And what they thought was, which is what most people think, is, hey, we need to put a new like marketing strategy in place to grow the business. And we're like, yes, that's definitely a part of it. However, what we saw in them in this couple specifically, and we see this a lot, is they had formed a belief that the more their business grew, the more division it would cause in their relationship. Because that's what they'd experienced up until this point. They'd experienced where as the business grew, as responsibilities grew, revenue grew, they had team members now, all of these things started to grow. They felt like their time was even more capped and that they couldn't actually connect anymore on a romantic relationship. When that belief starts to form that more business equals more pain, why would you do something that creates pain in your life? We don't. So subconsciously as humans, we run away from it. And so what we see in a lot of couples, and in this couple in particular, is before we put the business strategy in place, we have to look at how is the relationship doing, and has it formed any deep-seated beliefs that are causing you to run from that pain and therefore run from actually growing the business in and of itself. Is there anything you want to add?
So for this couple specifically, how we got them out of that is we helped them shift their identity to recognize their own value that they have within each other. So that way they're not micromanaging and control freaking each other in the business, which also helped the relationship side. And as the relationship started to become better and better and better, it helped them make more rational and logical decisions in business, not just knee-jerk emotional stress reactions to try and mitigate whatever issues they thought were causing them pain. That's one example of like maybe more of a darker scenario, but I can also give you a great example of a couple that did this really, really well. When they came to work with us, we helped them align on their vision, their goals, their strategy, and their roles in that order. So what happened was this specific couple, they were holistic health practitioners. We helped them align on the vision of where they want to go, which allowed them to kind of let go of some of that subconscious resistance that happens when you have two married couples that feel like they might not be aligned. Once they're aligned on the visions, we quantify the goals and ask ourselves, what are the measurable milestones to making that vision a reality? Once you have those two things in place, putting a customized marketing strategy in place that combines what works objectively in the marketplace with how they work uniquely as a couple, that Venn diagram is what creates the best marketing strategy for that couple. For them specifically, because of their unique shared giftings, we had them optimize a webinar campaign for their business. And this was a couple that within just a couple months of working with us, they crossed over $100,000 in revenue as a result.
A month.
A month.
Yeah.
Yes. In 1 month. And then they continue to grow from there. And the reason why is because once you get the vision, you get the goals, you get the strategy, then the roles become very clear.
Yeah.
Which basically is us asking the question between us, between our shared skill set and our individual skill sets, where within the strategy do we best fit, and how can we contribute our most authentic talents to the strategy? When we can help couples in those areas, that usually is the ticket for the next level of growth, and it's usually completely unexpected.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, sometimes when like the few times when I kind of interview like a 2-on-1 people, it's kind of like they fight each other or there's like chaos, right? But what's cool about you guys is like every answer I get hit with like the double whammy, like the double dosage of an answer, and I'm like having to put double the work to try to like digest it. And so what's really helpful from me digesting what you said there, Ariel, is you said a few times how like the belief forms.
Yeah.
And that's like an interesting kind of visual to think about, right? That, I mean, self-sabotage, it for sure is the number one problem. And a lot of things are subconscious and just say like, well, if we grow the business, it'll hurt our relationship. So like I'm holding myself back and not even realizing it. That's like, that's huge, right? And a lot of people aren't even dialed into that. And then to say, okay, well, how do we correct this problem? Then it almost feels like a marriage counselor situation, right? When you say like, hey, like this could be working better, or I'm not happy. And then, but if it's you from within the relationship going to your partner and saying, I want to fix this, well, you have an agenda, right? You have a bias. You have to get the other person to buy in on your idea, and you have to be really careful versus you go to that third party, right? You go to the marriage counselor who says, hey, I've got no game in this fight. And here's what I see, and here's kind of like the logical, like structured, I need to get into place. We need to get this vision in here, and that figures this out, leads to our roles. It seems so simple in hindsight, but then it's like, it's very tough from inside the relationship to try to like push your agenda and also like get to that point where you're helping each other and not kind of like pulling each other, fighting each other around. So like, that's cool to think about and hear about that story. So do you ever come across a couple where you're just like, this is just, it's hopeless, right? This is too far gone. You guys should break up or separate businesses. Is there any time when there's no helping these people?
I will say that we've never come across a couple where we're like, they shouldn't be together, they should break up. But what we have seen is there are times I don't believe a couple is emotionally ready to be in business together. I think that being in business together being in business in and of itself is the greatest personal development journey that you will ever be on, because you can no longer shove anything that you don't want to deal with under the rug. Business is going to pull it all out in front of you and make you face every single inch of it. And that is even more true when you are in business with your spouse, because now you have all of your own personal stuff that you have to deal with, but now you have how that interacts with your partner, who's not only your romantic partner, but is also your business partner as well. And so we have seen couples where either one person maybe started the business and they wanted to bring their partner into the business because they think that is going to make their relationship stronger. But what often happens in that scenario is they think that being in business together is going to fix the relationship problems that they're experiencing, where instead what happens is it exacerbates those problems, because you have to be able to have a deep level of trust. You have to be able to communicate with each other. You have to be able to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. And I think most couples are capable of growing in those areas. But sometimes we see a particular phase of life where we're like, okay, you may need to work on this emotional intelligence first before you're ready to have this mature relationship that is being in business together.
And that usually looks like couples getting on a Zoom call to talk with us about joining our program. They fight with each other on the Zoom call and start crying. And we're like, nah, we're not a good fit.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that there's no hope for them.
Yeah.
It just means that they're not ready to take the next step in business unless they are able to see a counselor to really dive deep into the emotional issues that would prevent them from having just a very sound business discussion.
Well, these are some huge, amazing insights. And I for sure have been on coaching calls like that as the future customer, not as like, not with couples, but I've been like, hey, can you help me with my business? And they say, hey, well, I need you to know this number and that number. And I'm like, hey, I don't know that number yet, or I'm not at this level yet. And so you don't want me and I don't want you. That's okay. But now I know like the person that I need to become in order to then revisit that. And so this is kind of profound to think about, that there might be some of these problems swept under the rug in the marriage. And then people think like, okay, well, getting into business, it'll save it. You might as well say like, let's have a baby to save the marriage.
Right, exactly.
And then it makes it worse, right? It brings all these things to life. And it's like, it's such a cliche, but it's so true that we need to work on ourselves first, and that you can't expect your partner to fix you or to mother or father you or babysit you. You have to be your own independent adult, and then the other person enhances, but you can't just like lean on and depend on the other person and hope that they will help you, fix you, help your business run things. Then you're just a leech, right? Then you're just a parasite. And we don't want that. We want to have the greater risk and the greater reward, and to have all this, fulfillment that we wouldn't have had if we were just there in business on our own. And so there's so many different aspects to think about and play with. But since I just met the two of you, I know that there's probably a question that would just be like so smart, right? So clever if I asked it, but you guys know what question that would be and I don't. So is there a missing, hidden, invisible question in our conversation that I should be asking you? And what is it? And can we just pretend I asked it?
That's that in and of itself is a great question.
Yeah. Kudos to you for asking that question.
Well, thank you.
So the question about the question that isn't being asked, man. Well, here's what I can say, because I think this might be relevant to anybody, whether they're in business with their significant other or just in a relationship with another human. Maybe a question that is worth talking about is, what is the number one biggest root cause of most tension in a relationship, period?
Yeah.
Because I would want to know that, right? And I can tell you, after talking to thousands of entrepreneur couples and having hundreds of coaching conversations with entrepreneur couples from all over the world, we believe we figured it out, like what the number one root cause is. And you know what it is? It's unmet.
No, tell me.
It is unmet expectations between each other. Unmet expectations. What we found is that anytime there's a little bit of resentment, whether it's present or it's beneath the surface between two individuals, there's usually an expectation that is not being met. Now, the reason why that expectation is not being met is also usually because of three things that start with you. Like I said, we like to alliterate. It makes it memorable, but it also happens to be true. If there's an expectation that is unmet in our lives, it is because those expectations are either A, unclear, B, unspoken, or C, unrealistic. And 9 times out of 10, the expectation isn't clear, it's not communicated. And if it is communicated amongst a couple, it might not be realistic. And usually that shows up for entrepreneur couples expecting that their business is going to go from 0 to 1 million in 2 months. Like that would be an unrealistic pressure to put on anybody, because it's just not the way that it works.
Or expecting that, if you have a list of things that you think your partner should be able to accomplish in a day, and maybe that expectation is just a little unrealistic.
Yeah. Or maybe it's unspoken, meaning I have an expectation in my mind of how date night's going to go. Ariel has a different expectation in her mind of how date night's going to go, but it's completely unspoken. So we're operating in two different realities that is basically setting ourselves up to have tension and have a little bit of resentment because we haven't just communicated about these things. Or of course, if they're not clear, if we feel tension in a relationship or any sort of conflict with another human being, but we can't articulate why, then that's an invitation for us to go a little bit deeper and say, what is the expectation here that is not being met? And how can I clarify that? How can I articulate it so that way it can be spoken and it can be realistic?
Yeah. I'll give a really kind of silly example, but we always like to say taking out the trash, right? So when you think of a couple, sometimes a big, tension point is one person didn't take out the trash on time. And a lot of times it's a one person has an expectation of the other person that's unclear, meaning how full should the trash be before it needs to be taken out?
Mm.
I may have an expectation that here, at this certain level is when it should be taken out, and Kyle's level might be different. And so that's a very unclear expectation. An unspoken expectation, maybe I expected him to take it out when it was at that full line, and I never told him that, and then it sits there.
And I couldn't read her mind. I'm
couldn't
getting
read my
close,
mind.
but yeah,
Right.
I couldn't do it. Yeah.
And then unrealistic is maybe he has 100 other things that he's trying to do, and I'm expecting him to also take out the trash within the next 30 seconds. That could also be unrealistic. So that's just a silly example of how all those things can come together into just the simplest thing that can cause fights and tension amongst even the best couples.
But now that we know that, we could diagnose it. So anybody listening, if there's any tension in your relationship, just use that framework to identify what the unmet expectation is and use the 3 U's to take control of that and to have the conversations that will lead to that resentment leaving the relationship.
Very amazing. Well, I love the polish from you guys. It's clear you've done this a bunch of times, right? And even in your answers, it's like, because you said that at the beginning here, that the structure is so important. Like the structure kind of helps you guys in your chemistry work together, right? I ask you a question and you're like, well, hey, here's your question, but like, let's adjust it a little bit. And here's like what the term is. Here's the label. And then here's the problem, and let's understand it. And here's kind of the structure, such as the 3 U's or the 3 S's or whatever the framework, the tools are to fix it. And then here's a little bit of an example on how like you might solve that problem, plus a little bit of a wrinkle or an aha that Kyle or Ariel had fixing it. And then, hey, so we got some humor, some randomness, but also some help. It's kind of cool to think about the structure of what you're saying. And, this is a show about you. It's not about me, but I can definitely in the background relate to some of what you're talking about. Like I was in business with a guy where the first 3 years were like that honeymoon phase.
Mm-hmm.
And then like there were like 6 years of like kind of butting heads, anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final 3 years, we both sort of worked on our own self-help, right? We both kind of worked on our emotional intelligence and communicating better with both of our spouses. And then as a result, we kind of drifted apart and ended up sort of peacefully breaking up. But that was kind of the origin. And I sort of, the last couple of years, fell into I have 2 businesses. One I kind of fell into with my wife, and I'm always kind of navigating. And there's some of like the 3 U's you mentioned there was I was at first like kind of expecting more for her, and sometimes if something happens, I'm like, hey, I know that you'll deal with it, and then she has less stress because I'm less on her about things, and so there's just like a lot to navigate, right? And it doesn't happen by random chance, and it probably won't happen by us trying to think our way out of our own situation, right? If our own thinking could solve it, we probably wouldn't have fallen into it. So we need some additional help, some extra brain power, such as from the amazing Kyle and Ariel. So how do they do that? If someone says, man, I can really relate to a lot of these couplepreneur conflicts, drama, solutions that you mentioned, and they got a good taste of what you're all about on this podcast, what's the next logical step here? Where should someone go?
Yeah. So I would say to learn a little bit more about us, there's a couple places. So the first place is our Instagram. So if you go to @Couplepreneurs, that's our Instagram handle, and you'll see a lot of the stuff that we talk about in our content.
Yeah. And if you could find us on Instagram, just shoot us a message. Let us know that you heard us on this podcast.
Yeah.
And that way we have the context of the conversation that we can potentially help you with. And then we can always discuss what you're going through and what a potential next step could look like for you. And by the way, we will be very straight up and transparent with anybody listening. If you're not a good fit for any of our programs, we are usually the first person to tell you, like, hey, this maybe you're not a good fit for the program right now, but here's a couple resources. We love to give things for free to help people grow in their couplepreneurship journey. So in addition to our Instagram, we also have a free Facebook community. There's over 5,000 other couplepreneurs in there. To our knowledge, it's one of the largest communities of entrepreneur couples on the planet. And in there, we have resources, we have templates, we have video trainings, just things that are specifically dedicated to what we're talking about here today, which are the complex and unspoken rules of what makes couplepreneurship work. And I would also say that if anybody's really serious about exploring the coaching programs that we have, you can always just go to our website or even email us at couples@kyleandariel.com.
Very cool. Couples@kyleandariel.com.
Mm-hmm.
We said Couplepreneurs on Instagram. And then as far as the Facebook group, do they search that, or is it go to the Instagram and then if you qualify, go to the Facebook?
Yeah. Normally I remember to say that, so thank you for reminding me. So the group is called Successful Couples in Business. So if you search that in the term, you'll see Ariel and I's smug mugs on there. Successful Couples in Business Facebook group is it is a private group, so you will have to apply to get in. We just basically need to make sure that you're a couplepreneur. And I will also say too, if you want to continue this conversation, we have a podcast called the Couplepreneurs Show, which is all about reverse engineering the success of some of today's most influential power couples in business. We also share lessons from our own life there as well. So if anyone's interested in that, you can check us out on any of the major platforms.
Awesome. Well, I love the branding, right? And like you say, couplepreneurs, people instantly understand what it is that we're talking about. And there's a lot to navigate. Perhaps it's even a bigger problem than we previously thought, right? When we start 20 minutes ago, we started talking. I was just like, oh, like what's there to talk about? And like you brought all these things to light. Like, man, we definitely need help no matter what kind of couple we are. And the good news is that we're not alone, right? We're connected on the internet and social media. So like you can, if you're a obscure World War I coin collector, you can find your people. In the same light, if you're a couplepreneur, you are unique and special, but also you're not the first ones, right? Other people have blazed the trail before you. And even though you have your own unique problems, there's probably some similar problems out there, either from the other couplepreneurs or what you guys have seen. So people need to check out that podcast and that Facebook group. But Couplepreneurs on Instagram is the primary direct call to action that we're giving people on this podcast. And so as people are going to the Instagram, it's time to put both of you on the spot, right? I promised you we would do this, where I ask you for a fun quote or lesson that has helped you in life, business, marriage, whatever, that you can pass on to us. So what has helped you to get to where you are as far as a quote or lesson?
Yeah.
You want to go first?
So I'll share a quote. One of my favorite quotes, and it's a little lengthy, but it's that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference that you want to make. So that's a quote by Jane Goodall. I think that a lot of people just use the last part, like what you do makes a difference. I like that first line of, you can't get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. So therefore, you need to decide what difference you want to make. And I think that's so important, because everything that we do, every breath that we take, every step that we take, everybody that we interact with has some sort of impact. And especially we believe as couplepreneurs, you're not only having an impact on, your kids or, the direct people around you. If you're a business owner, you have a platform in some way, shape, and form. So you have a platform that you're impacting people in that way, your clients, your customers. There's your kids, your family, and then you're impacting the community around you. So as a couplepreneur, there's some responsibility there to set the example of what it looks like to have a thriving business and have a thriving relationship at the same time, but just of what it looks like to be a good human and to use that platform for the highest good that you can.
Yeah. And a quote that I like that just really helped me on my individual personal journey was actually a quote from the Bible, Matthew 6:33, that says, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and all things shall be added unto you." And really what I love about this is a quote from Jesus after talking about all of the things that all of us as human beings are consistently worried about in life. We're worried about what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, how we're going to look, where we're going to go. But he basically says that our Heavenly Father knows these things and cares for you. And I'm not here to preach at anybody. I'm sure there are many people listening that don't share the same belief system, and that's totally okay. For me specifically, this has been a guidepost quote for my entire life, because what it means to me is if I seek first to be within the dominion and domain of the King of the universe, aka God, then I could feel relaxed and know that he has got my back and he will take care of things, because I'm making sure to prioritize first things first and not worrying about all of the things that are secondary and temporal in this world.
Very helpful. Well, they say don't sweat the small stuff, right? And that doesn't mean that you're ignoring the small stuff. It just means that you don't let it get to you and you're like, hey, here's like, I'm taken care of, and I'll also be on point as far as what I need to do. And I've got my mission, I got my goal, I got my partner. And also in the journey doing that, Ariel says to set a good example, because you're setting an example whether you like it or not, whether you realize it or not. So do the best you can, be the best person that you can and should be. Yeah. And the next step for us to do that is to go to Instagram and do that search for couplepreneurs, like them, follow them, but even more importantly, send that message to them and tell them about your situation. Tell them about where you're stuck, next steps, and how to proceed from there. Kyle and Ariel Tresch, the Couplepreneurs. Man, such a fun conversation, so much to think about. And we'll see everyone at Instagram on Couplepreneurs. And thanks to both of you for showing up, being super cool, and being informative and helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, thank you so much.